go for the rest of the procedure. Go for EVA. And I'll see you on the other side.
Hello, welcome to Stepping into Space, the ISS Experience. I'm Laura Mingail, founder of Archetypes and Effects. Joining us, we have an incredible panel who are behind the immersive series Space Explorers, the ISS Experience, the largest production ever filmed in space. Welcome, NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, co-founder and creative director from Felix Paul Studios, Félix Lajeunesse, and executive producer from Time Studios, Lajeunesse and Woods. So Jessica, you've been a part of the first 3 all-female spacewalks, and you've had a hand in immersing people in the ISS experience in a way that's never been done before. Why are these first steps so important for storytelling?
This tool is incredibly inspiring and exciting for me as an astronaut, and I can tell you that personally because one of the biggest goals of my mission is to try and share it with everybody on the ground. Not only the people that helped me get where I am today, but really all of the general public and all of the people on this planet. The opportunity to be in space and how it changes you as a person when you are fortunate enough to look down on our planet with your own eyes, and that overview effect, that life-changing experience for how you feel and the appreciation that you get for our planet, for our people, and how connected we are and really are one, all in this together. It is simply extraordinary to have gained that perspective. And I always say, I wish I could bring all the humans and all of the eyes of the whole planet up there with me to get this kind of perspective. Of course, that simply is impossible. So this tool that the ISS Experience is providing is allowing me and my colleagues to share what we do, this simply extraordinary experience that we are so fortunate to have with all of you, with all of the planet, in a way that's never been done before. I myself, the first time I saw this production, I was blown away, and I simply felt like I was back home, that I was right back there on the International Space Station. It felt real because it truly is this 100% immersive environment. And that is something that you can't capture with a photograph or with a video or with my description of what's happening. You feel like you're actually part of the mission, right up there with the astronauts, feeling and seeing what they see and experiencing what they're doing, and even feeling that weightlessness a little bit. I was simply blown away. So for me, just being able to share what we get to do as astronauts and that vantage point is an incredibly powerful tool. And I am so excited about this production.
Excellent, thank you. And Jonathan, you're behind actually multiple innovative projects that inspire and educate audiences about space. Why do you feel that stories about space are so important?
I mean, I guess I'd choose to answer that in 2 ways. First, I mean, ever since Time was founded in 1923, Time has been trying to find new ways to bring incredible stories to life and share them with people around the world. So for nearly a century, Time has chronicled history. And, you know, we've always looked with really great interest on explorers of all types. And from the very dawn of space programs around the world, both in the United States and around the globe, we've captured these seminal moments that really epitomize what it means to dare, to dream, to do what some would say is absolutely impossible. And now the 9 years that I've been with Time, you know, the work that I am absolutely most proud of centers on those moments where we've been able or been fortunate enough to bear witness to some of these moments and share these stories with the world. And I think finally, when you look at the incredible ranges of stories that Time covers, there's just a real need in the world today to focus on something that inspires people and gives people hope. And so much of the work that's happening on the space station and in its now 20-year existence gets really, truly directly at the heart of that.
Definitely. And on that note, what has Space Explorers allowed audiences to experience that all of this other content hasn't yet allowed?
So when we started formulating the blueprints and the plans for this project about 5 years ago, I sensed that this project could really reshape what it means to understand being an astronaut on the International Space Station from the perspective of the astronauts. And for us, it was always about helping people be a place, experience a thing, or understand something that they might not be able to do. And I think so much of what we do at time as an analog for that. And doing this with the ISS Experience and Space Explorers, and having the support of all of the international entities who make the International Space Station what it is, was fundamental to that process.
Wonderful. And now Felix. Felix and Paul Studios is really known for creating content that adventures into new territories for storytelling. You allow audiences to explore places and ideas, and your experiences capture real, not just real looking moments. Why do you feel that's important in your work?
So what we always try to do in our work, first of all, is really sort of strike the right balance between telling a cinematic story and creating a true sense of presence for audiences. And both of these things are distinctive crafts. Telling a story is a craft, and nurturing presence in a VR experience is another craft. And what we try to do is really bring these two things together to create a symbiosis. And when that works, audiences no longer feel like they're watching a story. They feel like they are living a story and that they are a part of it. And because of that, the emotional experience of audiences is elevated. And so in the case of ISS Experience, from the very beginning, the creative intent was for audiences to feel like they're crew members on the space station, and that they get to live with the astronauts and feel like they're evolving, with the crew, and feeling like they're one of them. And so we really designed the story, the visual language, and the pacing of the experience to really bring that idea to life. And one thing that was very important in order to achieve that sense of truly being there was to capture genuine and completely unscripted scenes with the astronauts in space, so that audiences would feel and would know that this is authentic reality. And we felt that that was important to achieve, mainly for two reasons. First, to show the life of astronauts in space as it is, and doing so, deepening the audience sense of immersion and the emotional connection to the story.
Beautiful. It makes such a difference in doing it that way. And you do more than direct multiple episodes of Space Explorers in space from hundreds of miles away on top of that. I know the content is captured in truly stunning 3D 360 with your customized cameras. The series is designed to be available in a range of immersive formats on top of that. So for VR, for smartphones, theatrical screens, and even domes in planetariums. What are your best practices for approaching directing content for multiple formats and screens from so far away, plus with significant time delays because of the distance?
Okay, so I'll start with maybe the first part of the question. So when we began the production of ISS Experience, our goal was effectively to distribute the content to hundreds of millions of people across multiple platforms. Virtual reality, 5G enabled mobile devices, domes and planetariums, a traveling exhibition, and even television. And so in order to stay on track in the creative process, given all of those formats of content that we had to create, what I did is I really focused on my core practice, which is virtual reality cinematic storytelling. So the first version of the story that we are building is a fully immersive cinematic VR series made of 4 episodes. And then what we do is we adapt those 4 VR episodes to the other formats. And if we need to do creative changes to them, then we do so. But the master story, if you will, is the cinematic VR story. And now in terms of directing a project like this from a distance, what has been truly key and fundamentally important is having a great collaboration with NASA and with the astronauts, and especially with the astronauts because they're both the film crew and the protagonists of the story. And that collaboration happened in different ways. Some of the scenes that we captured in space were events that were already on the astronauts' timeline. For instance, when Jessica got to the space station, we knew that we wanted to film some of the science experiments that she was going to perform during her mission. So what we did is we worked with NASA to identify some of those opportunities. And then I would look at a topology map of the space station, and I would determine the best possible camera angle and camera orientation to film those scenes. But there were also scenes that were, I would say, completely original creative propositions that we made to the crew and that the crew responded to and contributed to creatively. And one idea that, or one example that comes to mind is for episode 3, we wanted to capture a scene of Jessica and Christina spending time together nearby the cupola window of the space station and having a conversation with each other while taking photos of the Earth. And the creative brief was not really any more elaborate than that. Jessica and Christina ended up filming an amazing conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. And Jessica spent additional time looking at the Earth while commenting on her experience of living in space. And the result of that scene was just mind-blowing. And so Jessica and Christina really made that scene their own and took it to a completely brilliant place.
Beautiful. So Jessica, on that note, you were about 240 miles, if that's correct, away from Felix approximately during the shooting. So you played a key part in the creative direction of what was captured in space. On top of that, while in microgravity, while running science experiments and managing through some space emergencies as well. On top of the ISS and Earth-based teams collaborating with each other, how did you collaborate with your astronaut colleagues to capture moments in space beyond what Felix just mentioned?
Well, part of that collaboration is just inherent in everything that we do on the International Space Station. We wake up in the morning, we look at our plan for the day, and we have a whole list of scripted things, whether it's an experiment or some space station maintenance, fixing the toilet, or whether it's filming an ISS Experience episode. So we see that in advance and we kind of plan our day accordingly. And for these as well, since some of them were a little bit more thought-provoking, we sometimes got, additional questions to prompt us ahead of time so we could spend some time preparing our thoughts. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated about this production was that it's not just one or two glimpses like an interview would be of our thoughts or some questions, back and forth interview. Instead, it's really capturing all these different elements of what it is really like to live and work aboard the space station. So Felix mentioned filming some of the experiments that we were doing, but also filming those moments that really are just happening organically up there. Yes, of course, we did set up the camera that day while we were shooting in the cupola, but it was also easy to just forget the camera was there because that was one of our normal activities. And we found it even therapeutic for us sometimes because we would have these astronaut log type events where we would be perhaps answering some questions which Felix and Paul had proposed to us, but sometimes we just had some things we wanted to talk about or some things that we felt like were important to us that we wanted to be captured for our prosperity and that we wanted to remember for our own memories. And that was really therapeutic to just have that time talking. And so in collaborating with the other crewmates, it was interesting with those logistics. Sometimes one of us would be setting up the camera for an activity that somebody else was involved in. And we did work with each other, like Felix mentioned, sometimes to make it, to optimize it or to offer a suggestion. We know that they asked us to film this scene over here, but since we're already set up here and we're naturally in this environment working, why don't I just spend some time talking? And then we could, as Felix mentioned, be a little bit creative on our own part as well. So that takes some collaboration and logistics with everybody involved because, sometimes we were setting up an experiment, for example, of some work I was doing in the life sciences glove box. That work was really important to capture. It was this really interesting experiment that we were very excited about. But part of that involves some coordination with my crewmate, Drew Morgan. He had to come in and, give me something, bring a sample in, that kind of thing. And so we were really excited to capture that with ISS Experience as well. It wasn't just me working in the glove box. It would also capture that close coordination that we have together as teammates and really as roommates on board the International Space Station. Everything that we're doing is so connected with each other. So it was nice to be able to capture some of those moments as well and how we work together.
Wow, so collaboration, and it seems like you really had a hand in the project. Every single person on the ISS had a hand in the project.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the things we enjoyed so much was the moments when we were doing something, filming something together and capturing some of those interactions between each other, because those interpersonal relationships on the space station are so special and ones that I know that I want to make sure I have another tool to look back and cherish as well.
It's amazing. It's definitely an ambitious project. It's the largest production that's ever been built in space. And Felix, from what I understand, you've captured well over 200 hours of content on the ISS already, from the arrival of the SpaceX Falcon 9 commercial crew to taking audiences along in a spacewalk outside of the station. How do you plan for capturing the right moments in environments that you haven't even captured in VR before?
Well, there are many ways to answer that, but maybe from a visual standpoint, one thing that is really interesting and compelling and specific about filming in space is that there is not a normal orientation to film things, you know, and for because we're in a microgravity environment and the astronauts, they move around in all possible axes and orientation. And so depending on the camera orientation that we choose for a specific shot, the viewer's perception of the environment will be radically different. And one location inside of the space station can end up looking like many different locations depending on how the camera is actually oriented and on which surface it is actually attached, because that surface becomes your ground when you're in virtual reality. And that's really great from a creative standpoint, because that allows us as VR filmmakers to renew and to evolve the sense of place inside of one episode, but also from one episode to another. And so that's something that there's a lot of thought going into that and into camera position to capture all of those scenes. And that becomes particularly interesting when we film in virtual reality outside of the space station. So as you evoked, in just a few weeks, we will take a new VR camera outside of the ISS to film the first ever spacewalk in VR. And we're currently working with a pre-visualization VR software to help us prepare the shots. And what we realize is that if we orient the VR camera pointing at the Earth, then as a viewer, when you're in VR, you will feel like you are underneath the massive Earth. And if we orient the camera the other way, pointing towards outer space instead of at the Earth, then as a viewer in the VR experience, you will feel like you're actually floating above the Earth. And the feeling we get from one orientation to another is so radically different. And it's just amazing. It's just two completely different emotional and psychological and visual experience. So again, we're planning our shots very carefully with that in mind to build a rich and evolving visual and emotional experience for audiences.
Oh, those are some tough decisions to make, definitely. So Jonathan, going back about 5 years, you actually approached NASA with that idea to capture the first ever spacewalk in VR. And with Felix and Paul Studios already working with NASA on the Space Explorer series on Earth, NASA connected your teams to bring the spacewalk idea and much, much more to life. In an upcoming episode that we've just been talking about, millions of people will be able to now virtually step into space thanks to the magic of VR. How did Time Studios, Felix and Paul Studios, and all of the space teams collaborate to make such a difficult element of this production possible?
We could talk for at least another 25 minutes just on the origins of how the groups were brought together. But I think, you know, the one sentence answer to that is understanding that everybody needed to play to their strengths. So, very early on, 5 years ago, when I had reached out to NASA the first time, Felix and Paul Studios and Time Studios did not yet have a relationship. And, we at Time were trying to really figure out how to solve everything. And we realized that that's not going to happen. And then, in any project of such a large scale, you're taught patience at every turn. So ultimately, NASA brought Time and Felix and Paul Studios together and what are our strengths? Time has an incredible reach. We have a long legacy of covering space in ambitious ways. Felix and Paul Studios is a best in class, if not the best in class, in terms of producing groundbreaking virtual reality experiences. The astronauts involved, they all have a one-of-a-kind perspective and an appreciation for the challenges of living and working in space that we will never have. So all of the hundreds of people, if not thousands of stakeholders around the world who facilitated this, all brought something to the table. And there's so many international partners and you know, if you are engaging with this in a VR headset or in a museum in months ahead or, you know, years ahead, take a minute to look at the credits, because every single one of those people brought something unique to this, and we wouldn't be where we are today without every single one of those contributions. And I think at the end of this, looking back, and Felix may agree or disagree with this, but I think we had no idea what we were getting into and how monumental of a collaboration this was going to be, to make everything go exactly right and turn this into something that is going to transform, surprise, and delight people for hopefully years and years to come.
Definitely, that credit roll just reinforces this is truly the largest production ever done in space. And Jessica, one of the many elements that makes Space Explorers, the ISS experience, feel so truly epic is going back to that true capture of life in space with no special effects. It really allows you to time travel, and you can relive those moments in space, and we can step into them as well. How do you feel when you're able to step back into your time in space? But also, what do you hope that others will think when they visit?
Well, that is something that is so important to me. And it's interesting. I was actually speaking about this in another conversation earlier today, how unfortunately my experience in space already feels so distant. And sometimes, even though when I was up there, it felt like home, I actually felt, I think, more at home than I've ever felt in my life when I was up there. After a few months, you feel completely natural floating all the time. And you even think, wow, what's it going to be like to put shoes and walk again? But then, of course, even though 7 months seems like quite a long time and it was kind of a long mission, that's just a blip in time relative to my lifetime and relative to our existence as humans on this planet. So it already feels quite foreign and almost a bit surreal that it even happened. And that was something that I felt sometimes, even while up there in the cupola, floating, looking down on the planet and thinking, how am I up here 250 miles above the planet, orbiting every 90 minutes, and everyone else I know is down there? It is just this feeling that you think, wait a minute, like I feel like I'm in a film studio now. How is this actually happening? Because that's just the frame of reference that we have for our own experience and for our collective human experience. So now that I have this tool that I can put on this headset and return to the space station, it truly feels that way. I remember watching Anne McLean watch the preview of it. She had just gotten back from space and I hadn't gone yet. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I can't wait to show it to Anne. She's just gotten back. And she said simply, I feel like I'm home. And that is truly how it feels for us. We see the things that were part of our everyday life, even though I feel so disconnected from it and so distant from it now. As soon as I put that headset on, I see where I slept, where I ate, where I worked, and every last detail of the hardware that's on the wall or the particular cable running this way. It's already in my memory and it brings me right back there. So it is an incredibly powerful tool for us as astronauts to remember that experience, to help share it so that we can keep it fresh. And also for training, I think it will be a very powerful tool because it allows us to access and experience it in a much different way than we can with our training paradigms on the ground. And for everybody else, I just think it brings them so much closer. If they won't have the opportunity to go to space, this brings them so much closer to how it would actually feel to be part of our lives and to share it with us. And I hope that they really feel that way, that they feel that they're part of it and part of the mission. We certainly felt that way about the camera. I mean, I know the camera exactly where it lived at all times, and it was there. It was part of the mission, and it was like an additional crew member there watching. So I hope that everybody that watches it now can feel like that, like they were actually there for the mission, part of the team working together with the rest of us.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for all of your time. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to be an additional crew member myself by visiting through VR. And thank you so much.